So today we're going to go through homeschool teacher resources for you as homeschool mama. Most of the ones that I have today are going to be books, but I do have a few other things that I'm going to mention at the end that I use. Also, these can be anywhere from things that have affected the way I'm going to approach certain aspects of my homeschooling, to the books that have helped me decide what style of homeschooling I'm going to pursue, to what I go to when I'm trying to decide what curriculum to choose or what read alouds to choose. So my actual go-tos for research and figuring out what I'm going to use. So hopefully this is helpful for you. So welcome, thanks for joining me today. Before we get going, I do want to mention that this video is part of a collaboration with other homeschool YouTubers sharing some of their favorite teacher resources. So check out the link in the description below to see some other homeschool mamas resources that they use and help us make their job easier. Also, if you like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe, comment. If you have some teacher resources that I don't mention that are your just go-tos or things that have really shaped the way you perceive homeschool and the way you're going to approach it, please comment below because I would love to know those. But without a lot of extra jabbering from me, let's go ahead and just get to it. So first I have Dumbing Us Down, and this, just disclaimer, is not written to or for homeschoolers, but it was super eye-opening in certain things about the public school system and some of the foundational problems with the way the public school system is set up that also just made me think, oh, how am I integrating that into my homeschool without realizing it? And help me just kind of think about some ways that I want to change certain aspects of my homeschool as I approach them. And so it was actually super, super helpful for me to read. I do actually plan to do a complete review of this book and just kind of talk through some of the things that it helped me think through. So if you're interested in that, stick around because that will be coming out next week. The Well-Trained Mind. You may have seen this already. So this is a little bit of twofold. So this is definitely a classical education guide. And twofold, I would say, in that if you're interested in the classical method and kind of want to understand how it works and the theory behind it, the first part of this book is an excellent just walk through the method, walk through the understanding, walk through the whys and the wherefores. So if you're interested, I would say check this out. But the other half of this book teaches you how to do just that. So like I said, I lean towards the classical. A little bit of Charlotte Mason and other things mixed in. I would say eclectic, but classical eclectic, if that works. But I feel like this book made it approachable. Like classical always to me seems intimidating. Like I need to use somebody else's resources because I'm just not smart like that. I don't know Latin, all these things. But this book really brought it down into the level of like you as a parent and how you can achieve that without being this like amazing professor in all of these things. And so it's very practical, has a lot of example schedules, a lot of curriculum recommendations, and they really tried to keep their curriculum recommendations to things that are affordable and cost effective, but still fit within their style. It talked through how you can do your own history versus using a spine. It just gives some very practical, super helpful, down to earth ideas. And this is one of those resources that I come back to with each grade. I kind of look through their approach. What am I kind of looking for in my approach? But also then what are the recommendations for curriculum and how can I look at that and kind of bounce off that, use some of it, find some of my own. But I would say this is maybe one of my top teacher resources. If I had to keep one and nothing else, this might be the one. So if you are at all interested in this or have any leanings this way, this is just a really, really good book to flesh out what is classical education, but then to give you just a roadmap of how to do it as just a mom, how to lay it out with your kids and how to follow it without it being so overwhelming and confusing and intimidating. So yes, I love this. And it's broken down really well. And like I said, in the beginning, they have the walkthrough, and then it's broken down into the 3 stages of the trivium, which if you're familiar with classical is oh shoot, now I'm going to space. The beginning stage, I'm spacing what's called the logic stage and the rhetoric stage. And basically they break it down and it's roughly a few grades a piece. But they approach it in this stage, how do you do schooling? And here's our recommendations. And then in this stage, how do you do this? And here's how we would recommend walking through it and some ideas. And then in the last stage. So it's not like all at once. You're like, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. I've read the first few chapters and then I've scanned through the rest, but I've really only read the section that applies to my child's grade. So again, super, super resource and something that I go back to year after year as I'm planning and figuring out what I'm going to do. So here we have Home Learning Year by Year. This is another just resource for as you're planning or even evaluating your child's grade. What are you going to do next? What do they need to learn It is not written from a Christian perspective, so a lot of the recommendations for curriculum that I have here, they're not from a Christian outlook, so you may have to substitute or find your own. But basically, this goes through each grade, each skill, and each like aspect of skill. So I mean, like language arts, it breaks it down into all the nitty gritties of what your child should. Again, we don't always keep our children to the levels that the schools do, but it gives you a rough guideline, especially if you're new and you want to know, like, what am I supposed to be accomplishing in this grade? And if you're doing your own curriculum or mixing and matching. But it breaks down each skill that they should be learning and offers you resources or curriculum that you can use to teach those grades. And I think this is great in two things. One, if you want to create your own curriculum, this gives you a really good guide of what you should be doing. Or if you want to mix and match, like I mentioned, it helps you evaluate what you've already chosen. If you've already chosen a curriculum, you can kind of go through in this and evaluate, does this cover all of the things that I should be covering? And you can decide, like I said, if you want to meet this, but at least you know then what's expected. And then the other thing that I think this is a great tool for is an assessment tool. So you've finished a year with your kid and you want to make sure they're, grasping what they need to. You could go through each of these skills and go, oh yeah, my kid knows that. Yeah, my kid knows that. My kid knows that for the previous grade, and not just for planning ahead, but for looking back. Because I see a lot of people asking that question. How do I assess my child? Is there, a document? Is there a resource I can go through and see if my kids were they should be roughly? And I think this could be a great resource for that, because it just breaks it down so into such small pieces that it's really easy to go, oh yeah, they're good in this part of language arts or this part of math or this part of history, but not in this. So it's really easy to assess and see the places that they would need further work. And again, not just to see where they need work, but have some great recommendations for resources to teach that particular skill. All through the ages. This is an excellent resource. And I have mentioned it once before in my YouTube Mama's Made Me Buy It video. So if you're interested in that, you can check that down. I'll link that below as well. But this is just a giant book of books. So it is just rows and rows of book recommendations, which might sound intimidating, but they break it down really, really well. So it's not as intimidating as it sounds. It's broken down into historical times or eras or periods, and then also by geographical areas. And then within each of those, it's broken down by grades. So they have 4 grade lumps, 1 through 3, 3 through 6, 6 through 9, 9 through 12. And then they also, within those grades, have it broken down by type of literature. So literature, historical fiction, biographical. So it's broken down very nicely for you. So it's not like you're just reading this book that's full of names of books and going, where do I even start? And instead, if you want to get books to go along with your history or your geography, or you're researching a certain time period, or your kid has an interest in this or that, you can go directly to that time period, directly to their grade, directly to the type of literature you're looking for. And then they also have, in parentheses next to the title, just a 1-sentence summary of what the book is about. So it also helps you, like, you don't have to look at each book and go, oh, I have a title now, what is this about? It also gives you just a rough idea, very small. You have to go do some more research of what that book is even about. And so this is like one of those finds that somebody I saw, I have not seen a lot. And I was like, oh, that is amazing resource for homeschool. As I plan my years, as I plan my read alouds, as I plan my family reads, as I plan just researching things, like this is awesome. So highly recommend this. And it's definitely one of those that I'm going to be coming back to year after year after year. So another book on reads and suggested read, and that's the Read Aloud Family. Now, this is not just lists of books. So this is her approach to reading aloud and why she thinks it's so important, and just kind of her thoughts on it. And I think she has some really good thoughts. It challenged me, just her thoughts of like, you will never regret reading to your children. Like, no mom has ever gone, I read too much to my kids. And kind of her approach. And it was a good read, and I would recommend it. But also in the very back, she has just some lists recommending certain books for certain age ranges with a summary of the book. And for the most part, they seem really wholesome, good books for family read alouds, right? So that's what you're looking for. Just get some ideas for our family read alouds, or again, individual reading for my child. This is along the same lines as the Read Aloud Family, the Honey for a Child's Heart. And she has, again, some in the beginning, just kind of talking through why reading is so important, reading aloud as a family is so important. But then she has a lot more book list in the back. I would say fully half, at least half, maybe a little bit more of this book is just recommended books, read alouds. I'm pretty sure they are broken. Yeah, they're broken down by ages and types. And they also have a little bit of a summary in them as well. So again, you don't have to look up every single book. You kind of look through and go, oh yeah, no, and then kind of go from there. Um, but these are good, family-friendly, wholesome books for you to go through. And I find these kind of books helpful just because Google, I can pull up a list of books and some of them are so hit and miss. I'm scanning through the library. I don't want to read every single book to see if it's good or if I approve. So this gives me something to work on. And I may not like everything in here and I may love some of them, but it gives me something to start with that I'm like, okay, most of these are going to be good, solid books. I can go from there. So the last resource that I have that's a book resource is Uncovering the Logic of English, a common sense approach to reading, spelling, literacy. And this is different from my other books in that this just addresses one subject of homeschooling, language arts. It was actually reading this book that persuaded me to use her reading curriculum, the Logic of English curriculum. I had not planned to because it was too expensive. And that's a total another topic, but just reading this was like, yes, this makes so much sense. And there's so many rules in here that I wish I knew. So it just breaks down English into, it makes more sense than we think. And there's rules that classify more things than we think and less exceptions than we think. And so I plan to use this mainly with spelling because in the back, she lists her 30-some spelling rules that cover the majority of English. And so I'm like, I was looking through here and I'm going, okay, I have a workbook spelling set that I plan to use that I like. I'm going to take this and I'm going to take my spelling lists each week and I'm going to find the rules in here that apply to the spelling lists and have my children study the rules along with the lists so that they have these rules to use in all of their spelling, not just memorizing the list, right? So that they understand why things are spelled the way they are. And so I'll use this also if my child comes up into a block in reading and we need to go over some of the rules because this is a great reference guide for that. But in particular, I think this is going to be a super, super resource and just super helpful for my child learning to spell well, no matter what curriculum I'm using. So I did say at the end of this, I would mention a few other resources that I use that are not necessarily books. One would be the Kathy Duffy Review website. She basically goes through tons, an overwhelming amount of homeschool curriculum, reviews it, breaks it down into style, breaks it down into age, breaks it down into price, breaks it down into a really good page of how this curriculum is used and its strong points and its weak points. It's a really good resource, especially if you have a curriculum that you're kind of interested in but want to know a little bit more. It's a good jumping off spot. Her site has so much. She does mark her 102 favorite. In fact, if her site is so overwhelming to you because there's so much, she actually has printed a book that just has her 102 favorite, so you could start there. I find it less easy to go to and be like, oh, I'm going to look at the options that are out there for geography just because, like I said, there is so much on there. But if I hear of a geography, I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll often go to her website and just get more detail. And it's really good for paring down. I would say normally after looking at her reviews, I still need to do a little further research. It's not like the end of my research, but it's a really good place for me to look at and go, oh, no. It definitely can eliminate for me and be like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not interested in that. Or oh, maybe I am. And then continuing the research. Another one that I would just recommend to people in general is often the publishers of these curriculums have great samples for you to download and print and try out yourself, or just to look and see the way it's laid out and the way it's formatted, the way it's scripted or not scripted. So go to the publishers' websites and see if you can download a sample. I think when you're choosing curriculum in particular, that is something that I almost always do because even though I can see somebody flip through or I can hear somebody's opinion, there's nothing like actually seeing the curriculum and the way it's laid out and to see if it's going to be a fit for you. And then lastly, and if you're already here, this might not be that helpful of a tip, use the other bloggers, homeschool YouTubers. People have a ton of help out there for you. There is so many flip through and reviews on YouTube that I use all the time because, again, it lets you, people who flip through, you can see inside the book. You can hear their experience, what they had a hard time with using, what they like about it. And I have found those to be so helpful. So if you have a particular curriculum that you're looking at or a particular problem that you've run into, look that particular one up and see if somebody else has talked about it for you. Get some help from them. So those are my top resources that I use for myself. Like I said, either the way they've influenced me as I've just researched homeschooling in general or just thought more about homeschooling in general, or things that I use as go-tos or whatnot. Thanks for joining along. Again, don't forget the playlist in the description below. Go check out other moms' resources. I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. And if this was useful for you, please let me know.